Hey guys, this is Darian, and this is my discussion for Chapter 7 in Seminar and Courts. So this isn't going to be a very long discussion because for the most part, I learned about all of this in undergrad, so it was just kind of like rehashing a bunch of stuff that I already learned, but just in a little bit more depth. So the first thing I'd like to discuss are the parts of the chapter that really interested me, and the first thing that really interested me was the environmental crime section. This isn't something that you see a ton in just general courses because it's very specific and it's not something that we think about whenever we think about crime or law in general. And the reason I think it's important to learn about is because a lot of it does have to do with like the harm that large businesses cause to the environment, and most businesses are able to just pay their way through it if they're dumping toxic chemicals into the water. There's no prison time typically for it, and it's just you pay money for the harm that you caused. But in my opinion, that's not going to stop companies from doing this. As long as they have the money to protect themselves, it's going to continue to happen until events such as the BP oil spill occur. But even then, as you can see, BP's still in business. Yeah, they lost a ton of money, but they're still going. They're still a large corporation that's probably not going to shut down at any point in time. The second thing that I found interesting was the section about the road to same-sex marriage and the Defense of Marriage Act from 1996. Coming from a generation that's a lot more progressive than previous generations, I found this interesting because this act occurred before I was even born, and in my personal opinion, not giving the right to same-sex marriage is unconstitutional because typically the argument against same-sex marriage is a religious argument, and if we go based on the First Amendment, there's supposed to be a separation of church and state, and no promoting of one religion, but also not, what was the term? But also not destroying a religion. And because the right to same-sex marriage, it's not destroying a religion, it's going against someone else's beliefs, but that occurs every day, and our government does sometimes have the issue of promoting one religion over another, even though it is against the First Amendment. For the most part, I understood everything that was in this chapter to an extent, but one thing I didn't understand was under the property law section was, I guess my question is, what happened that allowed protective rights to people that are trespassing on somebody's property? Because how I see it is they're breaking the law by trespassing, and then say they trip over a rake that's in someone's yard. Does that give them the right to sue the property owner for medical bills, even though they were the ones trespassing? That's something that I would just like to have a little bit more in-depth understanding of. The last thing I want to talk about is the highlight issue box over how much regulation is too much regulation. And in my opinion, I think regulation is good because it helps keep large businesses in check. I know the highlight box addressed how, under the Trump section, how having regulations is in favor of large businesses. Well, also not having regulations is in favor of large businesses as well, because then they don't have to worry about going through all the steps to make sure that they're doing the right thing. As where, at least if there's regulations in place, if they're not following those regulations and policies. Yeah, they have money to hire good lawyers, but they're still going to be held responsible if they go against the regulations that they need to be following. For the most part, that's it. I thought this chapter was pretty straightforward, and I hope everyone's doing okay in this little pandemic that's going on right now. And I just want to say thank you for listening to me ramble.